Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'd like to start by saying thank you, everyone, for being here. The family really appreciates it. It means a lot to us, and I'm sure it would mean a lot to Masi too. Today's program will be beginning with Yasin by Saqib Dossa, so if we could please welcome him with a salawat.
صلوات. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب عليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي واجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. اللهم صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
Thank you, Brother Saqib, for that beautiful recitation. Can we please now invite Brother Mujtaba Jafar up to recite one of Masi's favorite surahs, Surah Rahman. Salawat.
Surah Mubarak al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيم الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجان من مارج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان وله الجوار المنشآت في البحر كالأعلام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذي الجلال والإكرام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يسأله من في السماوات والأرض كل يوم هو في شأن فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان سنفرغ لكم أيها الثقلان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يا معشر الجن والإنس إن استطعتم أن تنفذوا من أقطار السماوات والأرض فانفذوا لا تنفذون إلا بسلطان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يرسل عليكما شؤاذ من نار ونحاس فلا تنتصران فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فإذا انشقت السماء فكانت وردة كالدهان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيومئذ لا يسأل عن ذنبه إنس ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يعرف المجرمون بسيماهم فيؤخذ بالنواصي والأقدام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان هذه جهنم التي يكذب بها المجرمون يطوفون بينها وبين حميم عان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان ولمن خاف مقام ربه جنتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان ذواتا أفنان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما عينان تجريان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما من كل فاكهة زوجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان متكئين على فرش بطائنها من استبرق وجنى الجنتين دان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهن قاصرات الطرف لم يطمثهن إنس قبلهم ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان كأنهن الياقوت والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان هل جزاء الإحسان إلا الإحسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان ومن دونهما جنتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مدهامتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما عينان نضاقتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما فاكهة ونخل ورمان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهن خيرات حسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان حور مقصورات في الخيام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان لم يطمثهن إنس قبلهم ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان متكئين على رفرف خضر وأبرقي حسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان تبارك اسم ربك ذي الجلال والإكرام صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
Thank you, Mujtaba, for that beautiful recitation. Could we now please call on Brother Suhail Nasr to recite a few words of poetry for us with the salawat. Allahumma salli
صلوات علی محمد و آل محمد. سجاد رہائی پا کر بھی پردیس سے گھر کو آ کر بھی جب اشک بہاتے رہتے تھے زینب سے دکھ دیکھے نہ گئے. ایک روز طرف یہ پوچھا سجاد تو کب تک روئے گا. اس وقت میرے مولا نے کہا اس وقت میرے مولا نے کہا اماں ہے اپنے مقدر پر صغرا کے سوالوں پر کیوں نہ روئے سجاد کیوں نہ روئے سجاد کیوں نہ روئے سجاد. اے میری پھوپھی انصاف تو کر نیزے پہ جو دیکھے باپ کا سر ہو ساتھ سفر میں وہ جس میں چھیرا تھا علی اکبر کا جگر. دروں کی سزا ملتی ہو جہاں بچوں کو اشک بہانے پر کیوں نہ روئے سجاد کیوں نہ روئے سجاد کیوں نہ روئے سجاد. تم چھپ چھپ کر خون روتی ہو میں روؤں تو کیوں کہتی ہو رویا نہ کرو اے لال میرے بھائی کو گوا کر بیٹھی ہوں. معصوم بہن کو زندہ میں جو چھوڑ کے تنہا آیا گھر کیوں نہ روئے سجاد کیوں نہ روئے سجاد کیوں نہ روئے سجاد. نیزے سے گرا عباس کا سر میں دیکھ چکا ہوں منظر دربار میں کیوں مر نہ گیا جب نام تمہارا لے لے کر کہتا تھا لئی زینب ہے کہاں لے آؤ یہاں پر بے چادر کیوں نہ روئے سجاد کیوں نہ روئے سجاد کیوں نہ روئے سجاد. سب قتل ہوئے میں زندہ ہوں بیمار سہی لڑ سکتا تھا شرمندہ ہوں میں اصغر سے وہ تیر ستم سے لڑ تو گیا وہ تیر میرے کیوں کر نہ لگا جس تیر سے گھائل تھا اصغر کیوں نہ روئے سجاد کیوں نہ روئے سجاد کیوں نہ روئے سجاد. سقائے حرم رکھ لیں نہ بھرم ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں سقائے حرم رکھ لیں نہ بھرم ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں تم بھی نہیں ہم کو ٹھکرانا تم بھی نہیں ہم کو ٹھکرانا، ہم دنیا کے ٹھکرائے ہیں، سقائے حرم رکھ لے نہ بھرم، ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں۔ اب سارے سہارے ٹوٹ چکے، ہمیں اپنے پرائے لوٹ چکے، اب سارے سہارے ٹوٹ چکے، ہمیں اپنے پرائے لوٹ چکے، تم اپنی پناہوں میں لے لو، تم اپنی پناہوں میں لے لو، ہم غم سے بہت گھبرائے ہیں، سقائے حرم رکھ لیں نہ بھرم، ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں۔ اشکوں کی زباں پہچانتے ہو، جو دل میں ہے وہ جانتے ہو، اشکوں کی زباں پہچانتے ہو، جو دل میں ہے وہ جانتے ہو، ہم کہہ نہیں سکتے تم سن لو، ہم کہہ نہیں سکتے تم سن لو، بس ہاتھوں کو پھیلائے ہیں، سقائے حرم رکھ لیں نہ بھرم، ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں۔ مولا 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 تم باب حوائج ہو، روزے پہ انہیں بھی بلوا لو، مولا تم باب حوائج ہو، روزے پہ انہیں بھی بلوا لو، غربت کے سبب جو آ نہ سکے، غربت کے سبب جو آ نہ سکے، ہم ان کے عریضے لائے ہیں، سقائے حرم رکھ لے نہ بھرم، ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں۔ کھا کھا کے تماچے روتی ہے، زندہ کی خاک پہ سوتی ہے، کھا کھا کے تماچے روتی ہے، زندہ کی خاک پہ سوتی ہے، بجھ جائے پیاس سکینہ کی، بجھ جائے پیاس سکینہ کی، ہم آنکھ میں آنسو لائے ہیں، سقائے حرم رکھ لیں نہ بھرم، ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں۔ دربار سخی عباس کا تھا، کچھ مانگنا تھا لازم مانگا، دربار سخی عباس کا تھا، کچھ مانگنا تھا لازم مانگا، لیکن یہ حقیقت بھی ہے قمر، ہم پرسا دینے آئے ہیں، سقائے حرم رکھ لیں نہ بھرم، ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں، سقائے حرم رکھ لیں نہ بھرم، ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں۔ الفاتحہ۔
Thank you, Brother Sahel, for that beautiful recitation. Now, for the next part of the evening, can we please welcome Sheikh Ali Hussein Dato to bless us with some wise words. Salawat.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد. قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق وهو أصدق الصادقين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قيل لكم تفسحوا في المجالس فافسحوا يفسح الله لكم. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد. My respected elders, brothers, sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. When you and I come to the holy book of God, the Quran, it is the only book that we would accept, having proven it to us, to ourselves, from a time of thought and intellect. There comes a time as you and I are born, we are nurtured in a certain religion, brought up in a certain family or irreligious family. And then there comes a time when you and I begin to ponder and think and question ourselves and the reason for our being and our creation. Could it just have been haphazardly? Is there a creator? And if there is, what are his characteristics? For the majority of us, I'm sure we have arrived through our own discernment and exertion of effort to the fact that God is one, He is infinite, He has the best of qualities in order to be God. And with regards to guidance of man, we've come to the conclusion that there is a book, the Quran, that we accept cover from cover to being from God. Every other book, aside from the Quran, will require a bit more study on our part to ascertain its veracity or parts of it to be veracious. As for the Quran, we accept it cover to cover. If we accept that God is infinite and that God is all-wise, then even the placement of every word in the Quran has to have a meaning behind it. Otherwise, this was a Lord who revealed to the Holy Prophet, again in a haphazard fashion. He said what he wanted to say. He didn't think why this word before the other. There's a part in the Quran, as an example, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that stand for the sake of God, mathna wa furada, in twos and ones. If we just read through this and say twos and ones is what God has said without pondering upon it, we will miss the fact that God has changed the way every language is spoken. In every language, when you're advising people in numbers, the lesser number will come first. You'll say stand in ones and twos. Why here does God say twos and ones? Is it just because He wanted it to rhyme? Or is there something much more wise that God is speaking to you and I about? Is it because it's easier for mankind to make change in themselves, in the community, in their families, when they have a partner, when they have somebody to lean on, even when they go into business? Is it not easier for man to become more successful at times by having a partner and working close together with other people? In the same way, when we come to the first word that was revealed to our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, It should come as no surprise that God chooses the word after the Basmala. He chooses the word to read. That if this entire journey towards God, the most perfect book in our eyes, the most complete book, a book that includes parts of previous revelations and previous scriptures of Musa and Ibrahim and Isa and the like, Jesus, Moses, Abraham, if it includes their scriptures within this book, and if it includes the most pivotal aspects of their scriptures, then for God to start the revelation with the word read should have a great weightiness to it. Why is it that He commands man to read first and foremost? It could have been listen, it could have been watch, but He chooses the verb to read. Does that not show you and I that learning, understanding is paramount to you and I getting closer to God? One of the greatest banes of man, especially when he thinks he is self-sufficient, is that he becomes idle. An idle man or an idle woman or an idle mind is going to be a path and a slippery slope to destruction. Many a time you'll hear when somebody wants to retire that a lot of the family members, especially if it's the main breadwinner, will try and caution them against going into retirement. Because apart from gardening, nothing else comes to mind. Because the idle mind of this man or woman who's been working for the past 40, 50 years to all of a sudden stop will cause their destruction. And you see people's health deteriorating as well if they don't do anything after retirement. God is telling you and I from the onset that this Sharia that I've given you, Sharia is not just do's and don'ts of fiqh. Sharia means path. This entire path that I'm going to show you that you need to act upon and walk on to get to God requires continuously that you use your intellect to learn in order to get closer to God. And the natural corollary of learning is that you will also teach to other people. It is impossible for any man or woman to learn something that is of benefit to them, but that they want to share it with other people. Aside from a man and woman who has an ulterior motive, every sincere person, when they learn something, they'll want to share it with somebody else to assist and benefit somebody else as well. A businessman or woman who has found a certain method of flourishing in their business, naturally they'll want to share it with the next generation, with their family members, with their community members. Nobody wants to hold on to knowledge themselves because they realize in sharing it there is also a great benefit as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes this through the Quran, that He has given us an intellect to ponder with. Why does God have to mention so many times that I want you to think? Is it not but obvious that you and I are such rational creatures that we should think? Or is it that because of the social conditioning of man and the environment that they're in, they can become so complacent that even this most greatest God-given gift that is given to you and I of the intellect to think, sometimes we just want to stay in a comfort zone and not use it. And that's why He continuously says, do they not ponder? Do they not question? Do they not think? Or are there chains and locks that have been sealing their hearts? They can't use this intellect to get closer to God, to become a better human being. Do they want to turn a blind eye to the difficult questions in their life? Man's intellect allows him or her to reason, to learn, to deduce, and to memorize. But for every student, there has to be a teacher. The reason why God is infinite and He is Al-Alim and knowledge in its entirety is that if He is infinite, He doesn't need anyone else. He's not dependent. He is self-sufficient. Allahu Samad. Allah is self-sufficient. Hence, even in His knowledge, He has to be, by definition of being God, self-sufficient in His knowledge such that He doesn't learn or need anybody else. But as for everybody else from creation, including the greatest man in creation to be created, the prophets of God, including Muhammad, they themselves are finite in their knowledge. And the prophet's teacher when it came to revelation was God. Musa's teacher, the teacher of Moses, this man that according to the Quran was the one who spoke to God. Even he had teachers who are human beings. At times he spoke to God and he learned directly from God. But at other times he learned from Khidr, did he not? What is mentioned in the Quran is the righteous servant. He took from other human beings and he learned from them as well. He learned where he was falling short and Khidr taught him and added to his knowledge. As for you and I, we too require teachers in this life. For the bulk of us, there will be times when we are inspired by God, and we shouldn't think that this is something irrational. If we accept the Quran, then God says that He reveals even to the bee. If God can reveal to an insect and inspire an insect, then why can't He inspire you and I as well? There are times when you wake up in the middle of the night with a certain thought. There are times in the day that you remember something that you would have forgotten otherwise, or an idea comes to mind that you don't know where it came from. These all could be inspirations from God. It shouldn't be far-fetched that God can inspire you and I, despite the fact that we are sinners. At the end of the day, we are His creation and He loves us. Aside from being inspired from God, it's human beings that we trust to nurture ourselves and our family members, that we put them into an educational system, trusting the person who is going to teach our children and ourselves to nurture us into more intellectual, wholesome human beings. As soon as somebody takes on the mantle of teaching, the responsibility that they've shouldered is extremely great. I'll touch upon some of the responsibilities that they have according to the Quran and Ahadith and intellect. But at the same time, with every great responsibility must come a great reward as well. Let's take the Holy Prophet as an example. The man who has had the greatest responsibility when it comes to teaching, one expects that he will be given the greatest reward for his teaching as well. The Prophet meets a group of people from Iraq in a tradition, and he tells them, is it not correct that according to you, the verse in the Quran that gives you the most hope is the verse where Allah says, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ, where Allah tells the Holy Prophet, say to my servants, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ, to my servants. What should you tell my servants? The Prophet continues in the revelation, الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ, those who sin and transgress, you are God's servants. Not only the people who are pious and perfect and don't slip. God's definition of a servant is those who transgress and sin. He has one piece of advice for you. لَا تَقْنَتُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ, I ask you not to cut off from the hope of Allah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا, Allah will forgive every type of sin. Is that the verse that gives you the most hope? And they said, yes, that is. The Prophet says, as for us, the Ahlul Bayt, there is a different verse that gives us much hope. It's the reward that God gives us on the Day of Judgment. And He mentions this verse in Surah Al-Alaq, وَلَسَوْفَ يُعْتِي, in Surah Al-Dhuha, وَلَسَوْفَ يُعْتِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى. On the Day of Judgment, O Prophet, God will keep giving you until you are satiated and happy. Here the Prophet says what God gives us on the Day of Judgment for being teachers and guides is not material reward that we're waiting for. The reward He gives us on the Day of Judgment is the ability to intercede for our followers. And He'll keep giving us the ability to intercede until we are pleased that we have interceded for everyone that we wish to. And then the Day of Judgment continues with its questioning and answering. Such is the responsibility of a teacher, that according to prophetic narrations, as parents, you and I are teachers. Whether we like it or not, by the mere fact that we conceive children, that we give birth to children, we have adopted the mantle of being a nurturer and a teacher. There is no time where a parent is off duty. You cannot be in the corner of your house acting how you wish and presume that at that time you are no longer a teacher or a role model. A Sunday school teacher cannot think to themselves that they have to act in a sacrosanct religious fashion within the four walls of the school, and as they exit and go to the supermarket, they're no longer a teacher and a role model for the students that they were teaching in their class. As soon as you and I adopt a stance of being a teacher, of parting knowledge in any facet of life, be it so-called religious education, secular academic education, as a parent, whatever it may be, there's a certain responsibility that comes with it. Not only in our action and our speech, but even our silence is a type of education for the people around us. Is it not correct that if somebody was to do an immense act against God in front of the Prophet and his family, that we would expect that they would not remain silent? Is it not correct that these days of mourning of Ashura, of Muharram, where we commemorate the sacrifice of the grandson of the Holy Prophet, Hussein, son of Fatima, daughter of the Holy Prophet, that during this time, after he had been martyred in the brutal fashion in which the events occurred, is it not correct that people said from the enemy camps later on that we didn't fire an arrow, we didn't do anything, we were silent, but they were reprimanded for being silent as well? Because even in our silence, there is a certain education that is being passed on to people who are watching us. Let us look very briefly at the reward of a teacher. In a tradition, Hadith al-Qudsi, what God reveals to Moses, Allah says, Ya Musa, ta'allim al-khayr wa'allamhu an-nas. Oh Musa, go and learn good and then teach it to people as well. Not just learn it and hoard it for yourself. Remember, whatever God gives you and I has not been acquired independently of God. Whether it's wealth, status, fame, knowledge, it's been acquired by the two hands and the intellect and the eyes that God gave you and I. And therefore, it's not owned by us and we don't have the right to use it how we want alone. Rather, the responsibility of using it lies on our shoulders. God says, go and learn good, but then you have a duty to go and impart it as well. And then he continues and he says, for verily, I enlighten the grave of the teachers and the learners of good, and they shall never feel afraid in the grave. I believe I mentioned this tradition to you last year when we met on this same occasion, that the one who's in the grave, a time, a death that you and I speak about regularly, that the Quran reminds us of fondly, something that we tend to be afraid of because of the lack of preparation that we have had in our lives for meeting God. God says if you want to be enlightened in that grave, then if you want to have a shade on the day of protection, on the day of judgment, then one of the greatest acts that you can do is learn good, but then go and teach it as well. And there are numerous traditions that reprimand those people who learn to deceive. Those who learn knowledge in order to deceive other people. Those who learn in order to bypass law. That's also a type of information, is it not? You have to be quite clever in order to bypass certain laws. It doesn't mean being clever with the laws, but it means actually going against it in a deceitful manner. There is extreme caution against those people who actually learn in order to do evil as well. But as for those who learn good and impart good, God says will enlighten their graves. And on the day of judgment, when these teachers are resurrected, on the day where people are sorrowful, on a day where there's extreme heat, on a day where many will regret, God says, I resurrect teachers as an entire community, not as one person. He or she died as an individual, but when they're resurrected as if they have the reward and actions of an entire community. How does that settle with our intellect? We have to come to our traditions where the Prophet says, one who teaches anything. Don't think teaching is only quote-unquote religious laws and edicts. Anything which is moral and good. If you teach it, God says through the words of the Prophet, that I give the teacher the reward not only of teaching, but even acting upon what he's taught. It's as if by teaching somebody to be good, to say the truth, you get the reward of teaching the person to be truthful, and also the reward of every time the person says the truth as well. His reward doesn't diminish, but you get the same reward as well. Hence, for a teacher on the day of judgment, they are resurrected as if they have the actions of an entire community. I can continue, but I'll try and sum up briefly. Even writing. There are some times where there are things that you want to say, but you can't say it. Because the intellects or the people that you're teaching or trying to get through to are not ready for what you want to say. This is, again, not only in religious law or religious education, but anything. Wasn't it Galileo, I think, who was persecuted by the church for saying that the earth was round? After many, many a year, did the church apologize to him? It's not to say that the church was wrong and was insincere. It's to say that sometimes people are not ready for what you have to give them. And hence the Prophet says, when you speak to a people, speak in accordance with their intellects. Try and ascertain the crowd that you're speaking to and give them knowledge accordingly. A teacher, a math teacher, will look at the students first before adding towards them. They'll select a handful of students to put them in an advanced class or paper. Why? Because they've seen that the capacity is greater in some avenues than others. When you have children, is it not correct that you must treat your children differently to one another? When it comes to the definition of justice, is it to give every child exactly the same? Or is the definition of justice to place everything in its correct place? Look at what happens to Yusuf in the Quran. His brothers talk about their father, who is also a prophet, and they say that our father loves Yusuf and his brother more than us. Is it conceivable that a prophet of God, Yaqub, Jacob, would actually prefer and love some of his sons over others if he's a man of God? But what they saw is a different level of attention being given to Yusuf and Binyamin compared to themselves. That doesn't mean he loved them more. That means he saw a certain capacity in them which required that he gives them more time and attention compared to others. If you have two children, one who excels in academic knowledge and the other one who excels in, let's say, arts or sports, it would be unjust of you to put that child who excels in sports into a school or a high school where predominantly you're pushed towards academic knowledge and information. They'll fail there. You're doing an injustice. You have to look at the capacity of the child and put him into a sports college or her, and put the child who's excelling in academic knowledge into another school that excels in academic knowledge. That doesn't mean that because you're paying higher fees for one child over the other, you're unjust. Rather, it means that you're absolutely just because you're doing what's best for the recipient. One of the greatest responsibilities of the teacher is to ensure that they give their students a level of knowledge that will not break them, that will not confuse them, that will not make them feel that they are set for failure. Rather, that he or she should encourage them towards good. The close people to the Prophet, when they did wrong, the Prophet reprimanded them very harshly at times. But the people who were distant from the Prophet, the newcomers to the faith, when they did things that were abhorrent, a Bedouin comes to the mosque and urinates in the corner of the mosque, expecting now that the Prophet will come and scold him. He says in a tradition that when Muhammad came to me, he spoke to me in such a kind fashion. He never rebuked me nor insulted me. Instead, he said, "Oh man, the mosque is a place of prayer and of learning, not urinating." And he brings a cup of water and begins to clean the corner of the mosque. He said, by that action of the Prophet, I changed. By the way in which he taught, the method of teaching also is something that is an art for a teacher. Moses in the Quran again, when he is now spoken to God on the mountain and he's about to go to the Pharaoh and speak, God gives him a requirement. God doesn't say, go to Pharaoh, the man who's calling himself God, and speak to him in a harsh fashion. Instead, he says, you and your brother go to Pharaoh and speak in a kind, soft voice. Because even the method of propagation and teaching others will impact them. A child who is sensitive has to be taught and nurtured in a different fashion. He or she might irritate you continuously. You have two children. One might irritate you by the number of questions they are asking, by the continuous questioning, inability to accept, continuously being skeptical. But that child has to be nurtured in a different fashion. It's for that reason a teacher is given such a great station, not only in this life, not only in the grave, but also on the day of judgment as well. When it comes to writing, there are some things that you can't teach a people. And so you write. And you hope that one day this knowledge will not be lost and will be seen by somebody who is ready to accept it. At the same time, you and I must never forget that as much as we believe we may be on the right, we must always leave the option open to be corrected in our knowledge. One of the difficulties of learning is that you become entrenched in your knowledge, thinking that there is no other path and you are only on the right path. That my method of understanding this religion is the only way the religion can be understood. my understanding of a particular scientific information is the only correct method. And this is where a message of Isa, Jesus, peace be upon him, stands out, where he says, the best opinion is never to negate the need for a second opinion. As knowledgeable as you are, always open the door for another opinion to correct you, to strengthen your opinion, or to show that actually your bases are completely flawed and you need to start building these blocks again. There's a verse of Quran that I begun with, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strangely mentions in the Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, O you who believe, إِذَا قِيلَ لَكُمْ, if it is said to you, fil majalis, in a gathering and a seating, فَافْسَحُوا, make space, يَفْسَحِ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ, make space and Allah will make space for you. Now the obvious reading of this is that when you're cramped up in a mosque, instead of the mukhi saying salawat and stand up and move forward, he can read this verse and ask you all to make space and everyone makes space for one another. But at the same time, could it not also mean that when you're seated in a gathering of knowledge and you hear something that takes you out of your comfort zone, then make space. Open your heart a bit more to listen to somebody else's perspective. Maybe they too are right. Maybe you are wrong. And if you're willing to listen to other opinions, then Allah will also make space for you. I end with two final points. The Holy Prophet, when we celebrate Eid Mubahila, this Eid and this celebration where there was a gathering between Christians and Muslims. When the Christians of Najran entered Medina, they were wearing the robes, just like a imam would wear a certain robe, a rabbi would wear a certain robe, the Christian priests were wearing a certain robe. As they entered, 3 of them, into Medina, the Muslims of Medina were taken by surprise. We haven't seen people dress in this fashion. They realized that they are rabbis, so they followed them to see what they wanted. They entered the mosque of the Holy Prophet. It was the time of Asr. What did they do? They entered the mosque of the Holy Prophet. They entered a place where God is worshipped. Immediately, it was their time for prayer as well. Inside the mosque of the Holy Prophet, they took to a corner and began to pray. Their prayer, praying to God. Many a people around didn't open their hearts, like the Quran says, make space, listen, allow, facilitate. It's not going against monotheism. Have a bit more inshirah of sadr. Rabbi shrah li sadri. Oh God, expand for me my chest, as Musa says. People wanted to interfere in their prayer and the Prophet stopped them. He said, let them pray. And the Christian priests prayed. And then they came and sat with the Holy Prophet and then they discussed. A teacher has to have breadth, the ability to listen and then the ability to teach in a most perfect manner as well. Finally, a teacher must be extremely patient because it's not easy to listen and then to speak and then to be argued against and then again speak. But that's precisely what the Prophet teaches us. You need to be kind as a parent, as a scholar, as a teacher of any knowledge. You have to be patient. People threw stones at him, did they not? But he didn't show love in return. People insulted him, did they not? Did he not show love in return to these individuals? Did he not bring people in, not because he raised his voice and he screamed at them, but because when they screamed at him, he was polite in return and they realized that we're fighting a lost cause here. We're trying to agitate this man, but instead he's only becoming kinder and kinder in return. And he's softening our hearts with his reaction to us. In these days of mourning where we commemorate the grandson of the Holy Prophet Hussein, as I mentioned, one part of Imam's tragedy and the tragedy that took place in Karbala has a similar link with what we're speaking about in terms of teaching and preaching through action and speech. It's always off mention, but if you allow me to mention it again. When one from the enemy ranks, known as Hur, at that time from the enemy ranks, when he was finding himself making a decision between hell and heaven, he takes the decision, the difficult decision, to question himself and his motives, to question the knowledge that is being presented in front of him, the gifts and the rewards that are being promised to him. He questions this, and he finds more weight in moving towards the camp of the Holy Prophet than the camp of Yazid. As he moves towards Hussein, I want you just to understand how Hussein teaches you and I at this moment in time. He approaches Hussein with his son, hands on his head, at times looking down out of remorse and humiliation. And he turns to Imam al-Hussein and he says, "Oh Imam, is there any scope for forgiveness for me? I am the man who intersected your journey, removed you from safety, brought you and family to this desert plain where you can't drink water for 3 days because they've kept you away from the rivers. Now I've opened my eyes. Will you forgive me?" At this point, it shows you the generosity of a teacher. A teacher doesn't demand reward in order to teach. A teacher doesn't humiliate. A teacher doesn't make their student feel like nothing and petty. If Hussein turned around at that time and told Hur, "Have you forgotten what you did to us? Can't you see these kids crying because of you? Can't you see the men who don't have energy who have been slain because of you?" He could have spoken in that fashion. He could have made Hur feel useless and worthless. Instead, he removes himself from the entire equation. He shows that when you teach a people, teach them such that you give them confidence in their stance. Teach them with generosity and kindness and patience. He turns to Hur and he says, "Oh Hur, as soon as you ask God for forgiveness, He'll forgive. You don't need to ask me, who am I? Ask God for forgiveness, He'll forgive." If he taught in that fashion, does it not teach you and I that even between brothers, when one asks for forgiveness from another, we have to be vast in our hearts. When we hear an opinion that contradicts what I've grown up with, instead of jumping to my defense, I should give some space in order to listen. When I see people of a different religion or denomination, or people who are irreligious, I still have to give a bit of space to bring about a society that can live in harmony and unity and live according to morals. We're all on a journey. Everybody sins and everybody does wrong. But the worst thing that hampers a person on a journey is when a community or a people ostracize them and downtread them. Because then they never want to return back to the truth when the truth is finally made clear for them. I end with that, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask God to give the blessing of this gathering, the blessing of this congregation and its recitations and the mentioning of His book and the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. To our dear sister Nishat, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive her sins, elevate her station, make her grave a beautiful garden, and resurrect her, as the Prophet says, as an entire community on the Day of Judgment. Give her ease of accounting and enter into paradise, and give her a garden and a house next to that of the Ahlul Bayt in Jannah. وآخر الدعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.
Thank you, Sheikh, for those beautiful words, which I'm sure that many of us benefited from. Can we now please call upon Brother Muhammad Abbas Kareem to recite us a few words of poetry? Thank you. Salawat.
برائے تأجیل ظہور امام زمانہ باز بلند صلوات. حکم کی تعمیل میں مولا عباس کے حوالے سے ایک مناجات کے چند اشعار پیش خدمت ہیں. ایک اور صلوات پڑھ دیجئے محمد و آل محمد پر. اللہم صلی اللہ. نام عباس وسیلہ ہے ہر دعا کے لیے. مل کے پڑھیں. نام عباس وسیلہ ہے ہر دعا کے لیے, اس میں اعظم ہے یہ مومن کی التجا کے لیے. نام عباس وسیلہ ہے ہر دعا. کوئی مانے یا نہ مانے ہے یہ ایمان میرا, نام عباس تو بخشش کا ہے سامان میرا. چشمہ فیض ہے, چشمہ فیض ہے یہ در ہر ایک گدا کے لیے. نام عباس وسیلہ ہے ہر دعا. در پہ ایک بار جو آیا کبھی خالی نہ گیا, ہو کے مایوس کبھی کوئی سوالی نہ گیا. در کھلا رہتا ہے, در کھلا رہتا ہے عباس کا عطا کے لیے. بلند آواز میں نام عباس وسیلہ ہے ہر دعا. اور باوفا آپ کو بیمار مدینہ کی قسم, وہ جو بیمار ہے کر ان پہ ذرا نظر کرم. تیرے پرچم کی, تیرے پرچم کی ہوا چاہیے شفا کے لیے. نام عباس وسیلہ ہے ہر دعا. اور دید کرتا ہوں علم پر تو قلم رکتا ہے, یاد آ جاتے ہیں غازی مجھے یوں لگتا ہے, ابھی روتا ہے, ابھی روتا ہے یہ زینب تیری رضا کے لیے. نام عباس وسیلہ ہے ہر دعا. اور مکتب پیش کر رہا ہوں.
رو کے کرتے ہیں یہ اذلان کریم ایک دعا, بحر ظلمات میں اب ڈوب چکی ہے دنیا, بھیج دے مہدی, بھیج دے مہدی دوران کو اب خدا کے لیے.
नाम अब्बास वसीला है हर दुआ के लिए। बर मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद बुलंदतर सलावत। रहिमल्लाहु मन क़रा सूरतल मुबारकतल फ़ातिहा।
Thank you, Muhammad Abbas, for that beautiful recitation. It was one of Masi's favorites. Can we now call upon Muhammad Kamal Dossa and Mustafa Nato? I'm sure these two do not need any more of an introduction, but without further delay, can we please have Muhammad Kamal and Mustafa?
They say life doesn't come with a manual, but it comes with a mother. My name is Muhammad Kamal, and I lost my mum about 1 year ago. Mummy was my best friend, my mentor, and my teacher. She has made me the young man that I am today. She taught me to be kind, modest, and to face problems in life with a smile. Most of all, she taught me how to look for colours in any difficult situation in life. The last year has been a difficult year for the whole family. Mummy was the light of the family. She always brought joy and happiness in any room she walked into. Even though we have been struck with grief in the last year, we have tried to have a positive outlook on life, just as Mummy did throughout her life, especially during her illness. She would always look for the good in people and help them find it, and never ever judge anyone. I still remember the day when she was diagnosed and had to come home to tell us. She was so chilled and somehow still made us laugh and said that this too will be a blessing. Mummy was a very simple person. The smallest things would make her happy. She loved spending time with people of all ages, especially children and elderly people, playing with her cat, Mihu, teaching, and simply spending time with family. Looking back at the precious time I had with her, I realized how many life lessons she has taught me. One of her favorite quotes was, "Everything happens for a reason." After everything that has happened, I finally understand the importance of that quote. Another thing she always loved to say was Alhamdulillah, which means praise be to Allah. She always showed gratitude for all the good things and even the bad. Even though it was a tragic event for the family, Mummy passed on so peacefully, and that gave our hearts so much peace. And I would have never asked for a better farewell. And now I understand that everything happens for a reason. And finally, I would like to end on a quote. And I could not think of a better quote than that of my mum's own. The colours are all around us. We just have to look. Thank you. Al-Fatiha.
My respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Api, as we used to call my aunt, never treated us like her nephews. The long chats we used to have are still as fresh in my mind as they were when we had them. She taught me so much during her life, but somehow she taught me so much more after her passing. She taught me the effect that a genuine person could have on people. The love shown to her and the family since that dark day in August last year has made me open my eyes to the legacy that she has left. I learned that sometimes we need to stop and think. We need to stop and appreciate. We need to stop and admire those things around us that we generally take for granted. Api had a quest for fun. Yes, she was far older than me, but she was always up for playing. Badminton or swing ball in the garden, board games in the evenings, and she even taught me how to slow down and enjoy making a puzzle. As we know, life does one day end for everyone, and what we do in that life is what matters. Api taught me the art of positivity, and the only way to maintain full positivity is by removing negativity from your life. Do things that you enjoy, eat those foods that you like, and become as successful as where you are comfortable, and surround yourself with people that you love. I would like to take a minute here to remember another young passing we had recently. Somebody who was so supportive to us as a family when my aunt passed away, Marhum Fazl Varani. He was at the hospital the evening my aunt passed away. He was at the council office the following morning, and he was always there when we needed him. I would like to thank everyone here today for the support you have given the family over the last year, and for the support you gave my aunt during her illness. Please recite a Surah Fatiha for my late aunt Nishat Dossa, for the late Fazl Varani, for all Marhumin of the Nattu and Dossa family, and all those who we love and miss that have left us. Al-Fatiha.
Thank you, Mustafa and Muhammad Kamal, for those touching speeches. I want to take this opportunity to commend Muhammad Kamal and Asiya for their strength, bravery, and maturity over the last year and prior. The amount of growth we have seen in them has been nothing short of miraculous, and is a testament to Allah's promise to provide us with strength in times of hardship. We couldn't be any more proud of them, alhamdulillah. Masi was very fond of giving, and as you may remember, we launched a fundraiser when she passed with the Zahra Trust. It only feels appropriate that we now invite the Zahra Trust up to share some words about their wonderful work. Salawat.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على محمد وآله الطاهرين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, and give from what we have provided for you before death comes to one of you and you cry, my Lord, if only you delayed me for a short while, I would give in charity and be one of the righteous. My respected scholars, my elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Muntazir Jafar and I work with the Zahra Trust, as Brother Fayaz introduced us. We do two kinds of work primarily. The first is emergency aid. So on the ground, for example, you will have heard recently of the extreme weather conditions in Pakistan and Afghanistan that have displaced many people. A lot of people have lost their lives in these tragedies. So we are on the ground providing emergency aid there. And the other way we work is by providing long-term and sustainable methods such as of charity, such as housing and education being two main ones. We are here today where we have a stall outside asking for your donations. The message that I want to put across today is that it's very easy for us over here to put money in a charity box or to tap your card on a contactless machine and not really think about what those 5, 10, 20, 15 pounds are doing to somebody in another country. So I want to share with you a story to that effect. In one of the areas that we work in that are very close to the hearts of all the Shias, we went to visit a family. Now this family was a mother and 5 children living in an abandoned hotel room. So this was their situation. They were in a room, a very small room, maybe the size of this wall to this pillar, in fact even smaller. And in that room was a mother and her 5 children. The mother was explaining to us how hard it was for her to sleep every single night, knowing that because of the nature of where they stay, anybody could at any time access their living quarters. She was talking about how they had 1 hour of electricity a day provided by a tiny generator, which they would use to light their homes. That generator was falling apart at the seams. It cost $200, right? Now, if every one of us here today gave £1, we could raise money for something that is the bane of their life, quite literally. And the saddest part is that they had no running water. So in order to heat water, they would have to find a bowl, fill it with water, oftentimes from the street, or go into a shop and ask for some water. To heat water, they would take the wires out of the generator and dip them into the bowl of hot water. Now, it doesn't take an engineer to know that that's very dangerous, right? But they have no other way to live. These are the kind of people that you help. So the next time somebody comes at you with a card machine or a bucket and says, donate some money to charity, it might be a chore for you, but those £5 that aren't going to hurt you, that maybe 2 morning coffees you can't have, is actually improving someone's life in a drastic way in another country. We're here, there's many ways you can donate. You can download the Zahra Trust app. Through the website you can donate. Alternatively, we are here outside. We have some nice children's workbooks. We have some merchandise. We also have a poetry book on sale. All proceeds go towards the Zahra Trust. I'd like to thank the family for allowing us to come and speak and present today. Please recite a Surah Fatiha for Marhuma Nishat Dossa and Marhum Fazal Virani. Rahimallahu man qara al-Fatiha.
Thank you for enlightening us with your constant and commendable efforts. Can you please now all rise for ziyarat? This will be followed by some food, and please stay behind after, as we will be praying namaz here as well.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذريتك، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن، أجل الله فرجه وسهل الله مخرجه وظهوره، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم كل وليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة، وليا محافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرزك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا الله.
If I could ask everyone to recite Surah Al-Fatiha.